First call, I showed up down here, me and Dan Bloodsoe, and we immediately starting trucks and took off down there. I don't know who comes second and third because it was so bad. But when I arrived, it was bad.
Jim Byler is the chief of the Noxon Rural Fire District. A lean, bushy-bearded man, he usually runs the buses at the local school district. But in the early morning hours of February 27, 2024, he was racing from his home to downtown Noxon while radioing for backup. The call came in about 5:45 a.m. from a motorist driving along Montana 200 on the opposite side of the Clark Ford from Noxon, an unincorporated community of about 250 people in Sanders County. Something was burning across the dark water.
Somebody's seen it from 200. So actually, everybody figured it was burning for a couple hours before it was called in.
As he drove toward town that morning, Jim paged once for mutual aid. As he came up on the Noxon Bridge, the artery connecting the community with the highway and the outside world, he saw that he needed more help.
Big ball of orange flames. It was huge. I mean, the town was lit up. It was lit up. But it was only one building at that time, too. And that's just from that building.
Before the fire, Noxon's downtown was made up of 4 storefronts: the Angry Beaver General Store, the Mercantile and Café, Toby's Tavern, and Johnson Hardware, which were separated from the other 3 by Broadway Street. People around town knew of the General Store as a place to grab some quick groceries and other odd items. The Mercantile and Café had become a popular restaurant for residents of Sanders County, and everyone knew Toby's. The storied bar, now run by Toby's daughter Gail, was Noxon's community center and history museum. If you lived in that part of the state, you probably donated a $1 coin to Toby's collection. The General Store, Mercantile, and Tavern were squeezed together on a single block, the Western-style false-front facades looking out on Noxon Avenue, and toward the Clark Fort. By the time Jim got into town, the Angry Beaver was pretty much burned. You could see clean through it, he said. While word of the fire spread through social media, like Facebook, people living in town only need to look out their window. Kevin Johnson, who owns Johnson Hardware with his wife Laura, lives above Noxon. He remembered the strange color in the sky.
Dogs woke me up. Dogs woke us up out of bed, and so I looked outside, let them outside, and it looked a little odd outside just because it was an orange hue in the air, and I thought, man, this is a funny sunrise. And when the fog finally cleared, I realized that it wasn't a sunrise. It was actually fire. We live just above town. We overlook town here. And so I looked down the way here, and after I realized, well, it's not my hardware store burning down, I looked around and yelled at Laura, said, "Get up, we have to head to town, it's on fire."
April Bowe, who grew up in Noxon but only moved back the summer before the blaze, thought it was a house fire. Bowe, who was manning the cash register in the trailer that the General Store had relocated to since the fire, had a job in Heron at the time.
So I actually lived just up here, so I could see it. So it was actually pretty awful. At first I didn't realize it was a store. I thought it was somebody else or something.
It took just minutes for Kevin and Laura Johnson to get down to Noxon Avenue. By then it was already over for the businesses just a stone's throw from the Johnson storefront.
We were down here within 10 minutes of waking up, and it was pretty well, the grocery store was already in the basement, burnt down. So, very hot fire, and shortly after that, down went Toby's, and because it was, they couldn't put it out. You could have had LA fire here, and it wasn't going to get put out as hot as it was by the time we got down here. And that was about the same time fire departments were responding.
Jim Byler's firefighters were receiving mutual aid from crews in the neighboring communities of Heron and Trout Creek. He figures they had more than a dozen fire apparatus on the scene and around 30 firefighters, but by then the fire was spreading.
And we all were spraying water on all 4 sides of all the buildings because then it hit Toby's second. And it was starting to suck up to the rafters because the rafters outside was all wide open.
By the time Noxon firefighter Tegan Summers arrived, the General Store was on the verge of collapse. His father woke him up that morning, telling him to get his ass out of bed because Noxon was burning down.
It was still dark outside, being February, and it lit up everything. We don't got any street lights, besides maybe 1 or 2, and By that point, the front was about to cave in. There was flames about everywhere and on the store. And then Toby's started to burn in the middle-ish from the left side, because that's where the store and the bar were connected.
Kevin and Laura Johnson tried to help as much as they could without getting in the way. They pointed firefighters from the other towns to Noxon's fire hydrants, but mostly they watched Noxon's downtown burn down.
I stayed out of the way. We didn't want to interrupt what was going on right on top of that fire there. And so for us, just looking at it, you could just see it glowing because the grocery store burnt very hot and it was gone. It was gone in the basement. And you could see the smoke coming out of Toby's and the restaurant. You could just see smoke billowing out of those things that indicated that it was obviously burning inside pretty hot.
I think the only thing could have maybe helped save it is if a helicopter was here at the same time we were, but it would have blew the buildings out anyways. I mean, we pumped. I don't know. It's in my report, but we pumped lots of water. Because we had this hydrant set up. We had a hydrant set up down there. 2 hydrants in town. We were pulling hoses straight off the hydrants to the trucks. And we had pumps set up on the river, so we had plenty of water. But that fire was just so intense.
The firefighters working the scene almost instinctively began salvaging what they could from inside the buildings, even as the fire burned around them. Byler came across a group trying to save the safe from the flames. He lent a hand, then told them to knock it off.
Well, actually, I helped with the safe. Me and Corey in the back there. Yeah, because I told them they can't retrieve nothing else. Because they were already standing in 4 inches of water, and you could see the flames rolling across the top. And they went back. They went inside through the back, and I found out they were back there. So I went back and told them they had to leave. But they had the safe almost out, so I helped them get the safe out. And then I said, "You can't go no more. That's it." Yeah. Because it was already rolling across the ceiling.
The items saved from the fire included the tip jar at the Mercantile, the saved cash, alcohol, and personal belongings hauled out of Toby's Tavern. Tegan found himself in a room converted for storage inside the storage bar.
That was originally Toby's. It was like a barber and all this stuff, and they stopped using that. And
Yeah, it was a barber.
yeah, and they just kept it as storage. And there's old pictures and just sayings from Toby, just putting it up when he was still around. And we were managed to grab all that and give it to the owner, and then save all the alcohol from the big refrigerator they had.
Sam Overman, another Noxon firefighter, remembered crews working to get the alcohol out of Toby's Tavern.
All the liquor and all the beer was saved, and all the cash.
Yep.
There was a little cooler at the end of Toby's bar that
In the back.
that was saved, and then there's a big diesel tank behind that, and that was saved.
There were other surprises inside the bar, too.
I do remember being told that there was quite a few weapons throughout there, because Gail was quite the stasher with quite about anything of hers. And I was spraying water, and all of a sudden I hear this boom. And I'm like, what is that? And the owner came up right behind me and started yelling, I forgot there's 12 gauge in there. And it just started going off one by one every other minute. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to step back a couple 10 feet.
They also pulled out the flag given to Toby, the original owner of the bar, who was an Air Force veteran. And they recovered an estimated 10,700 silver dollars. Customers had donated the coins over the years, and they've been stuck all over the tavern's interior. Byler remembered adding one to the back of the bar in the 1970s. What had to be the biggest save, though, is the bar itself. As the buildings burned, firefighters worried that the false fronts would collapse down on them as they hosed the structures with water. So the word went out for a logging truck.
We brought a log truck in and knocked them down for the safety of the firemen because they were trying to lean out to the street. So we put them in on the fire.
That truck ended up pulling double duty that morning.
We were trying to get a log truck. Well, we were just trying to get something with a boom to get a couple valuable things out of the bar. Such like there was they had a bar, and they had a safe in there as well. And we finally contacted a guy with a log truck, and he came down there. I think his name was Eric Weir, and we were able to get both the safe with the money and the bar with everything inside of it still intact. Yeah, just some burns on the outside.
Tegan remembered seeing Gail Terrian, Toby's daughter who had run the bar since his death, watching them work. Gail, who you can still catch walking her dog around the vacant lot where the bar once stood, declined to be interviewed for the story. When I met her briefly while walking along Noxon Avenue, she simply said that it was too much for her.
Yeah. Once we started getting all valuable and important stuff out of the bar, the owners came up, and we were okay with it because it's her stuff. And yeah, I mean, we were all just right there, just trying to. We all had a job, and once a guy was even move stuff, and she started to break down, and I was just trying to just get that to a position where it can be managed and be put somewhere else where we can help her and everything's still okay.
Kevin Johnson was there as Noxon's other business owners came down to check on their stores. It was emotional, he said.
We saw all of the store owners that day. We saw all the owners down here, and you could tell it was very emotional for them. And for us, we knew it was changing. It didn't take a rocket scientist to look down the road and see that things were going to be different.
The fire was deemed contained at 11:15 that morning, though firefighters monitored the area for several days afterward. Jim and his wife even camped out overnight. Rumors had begun spreading even as the fire burned, and the word around town was that an arsonist was involved. Although the various insurance companies involved eventually had 3 teams sifting over the wreckage, it took them a while to get going. That gave time for suspicions to take root, Jim told me.
But it went quick. I mean, the rumors went. I mean, we were still there, and it was being called arson. Well, I got crucified because of it.
That a cause could never be found for the fire didn't help. When investigators showed up, they couldn't even figure out where the fire began, Jim remembered. It was eventually deemed undetermined. One of the reasons investigators went with that designation was that if evidence ever emerged of an arsonist, they could pursue criminal charges, Jim told me. If they called it accidental, though, they wouldn't have that option. But
it wasn't arson.
Asking around town, there are a few non-arson-related theories as to why the fire started, and why it eventually consumed all 3 buildings. There's the age of the buildings, for one. How they looked as though they might topple over in a strong wind, said Tegan. Many, including Kevin Johnson, believe the wiring played a role. The firefighters who work the blaze tend to agree.
No way would that ever be ruled arson. They were just too old. The wiring was, ancient. Some of it was still nubbing to wiring.
There was copper wiring all throughout the bar.
Well, copper that's all that's illegal.
Yeah, it was all bounded up.
Yeah.
Just nasty.
But the suspicions about arson persisted and turned into anger, which ended up being directed at the fire department. It got hot enough that Jim decided to step aside for a little while. If people wanted a villain, they could blame him, he told me. He didn't want the department and his firefighters to catch the brunt of it.
Or let me take all the shit and leave the fire department out of it. The board didn't like that decision, but I thought it was best.
The town, meanwhile, was grappling with a huge loss. April Bowe remembered it as devastating.
I looked pretty awful, Everything was mostly gone. I mean, there was a little bit of some building parts over there. And almost boards and metal everywhere. Community people trying to help. Devastation. Yeah, can't be replaced, son.
The loss of all 3 businesses at once was a gut punch. There was the loss of what most people consider town landmarks. But there was also the loss of, a place to get snacks. Gone was the restaurant, perfect for dinner dates. Gone was the store, where you could grab staples on the fly. Gone was the combination bar and unofficial community center.
Toby's was nice. I mean, I never went there after I moved back here. When I was a kid, I always hung out there. But like the Angry Beaver, I was in there every day because I run the bus garage and the fire department. So I was always in there buying snacks for the guys, and we'd had training meetings, and, we once a drive. I mean, it was close. It was there.
I don't remember ever seeing when Toby's was actually open throughout the day. Or it's just you seen cars there, park and open the door, and you're welcome. And I don't know, it was very traditioned. They always have birthdays for people, all the older people that have been there their whole life.
She didn't even have to be open, and she'd cash a check for people.
Yeah, she carried out the check down.
Open up just to cash a check.
But yeah,
You talk to any of the old timers around here, once a week or every 2 weeks, there'd be a handful or more old timers, the originals in this area, 70s and 80s. That's where they would go for one day. They get together, and now they don't. They just sit at home. They don't have a hangout unless the Ridge Riders, snowmobile clubs has a meeting. Then they meet up. That used to be, at least once a week the old timers get together.
Despite the loss, Noxon was ready to roll out the welcome mat as the seasons changed, and the annual 4th of July bash loomed. It was the height of tourist season, but travelers weren't as plentiful as in years past. Many of the people who stopped through came to look at how the town was doing after the fire, Jim told me. So they decided to make the Independence Day celebration bigger.
We invited more people this year, though, to our parades. We actually had the sheriff. We invited the sheriff this year. We invited his brother's fire department. So we had a lot of frickin' trucks. So it was pretty good bang.
Tegan recalled it as one of the busiest he could remember.
We actually had more people this year.
We had the dudes, same if not more traffic we always do every year.
Yep.
People park all the way from on the side of the road, from the stores all the way up to the other side of town. Say Noxon, squeezes. Yeah. So, but Jim is right. I think it was a lot more packed just because, everyone wanted to see what was going on.
Tegan isn't alone. Talking to people around town, everyone remembers just how much effort went into that day and the fun that was had. Noxon's 4th of July celebration typically involves the parade, but also features chicken coop bingo, turtle races, and live music. It is, in Kevin Johnson's words, a traditional 4th of July.
Parade was the biggest parade I've ever seen. So that was good. We had, people from Noxon here and Trout Creek that lined up very, very well. So that was good to see. And then they had a live band in town. Was that on the 4th of July, Laura? Yes, they did. They had a live band in town. One of our local high school guys that graduated out, that's a semi-professional singer, came back to help do a dedication for a lady that had passed away here, to the Larkin family. And so that was really good to see. And again, music and food, that brings people in all the time. But it was exceptional on the 4th of July. It was really good.
But days later, Noxon got a second blow. Inspectors working the Noxon Bridge, a more than a century-old span that connects the town to the rest of Sanders County, was unsafe. Roadblocks went up. Noxon was cut off.
We happen to be out of town again. We, being business owners, we don't get to leave that often, but it seems like every time we leave, something happens. Literally, when the Hereford burnt down a couple years ago, we were out of town. But, we were out of town. My son called us up. He's like, Dad, they just closed the Noxon Bridge. And I said, boy, you better get on the horn and start making phone calls.
This is Jordan Van of Van Law Firm. At Van Law, we understand how life can change in an instant. Whether you've been affected by a fire, an accident, or any other disaster, you don't have to go through it alone. We're here to help victims rebuild and recover, from personal injuries to property damage and financial struggles. Your rights matter, and we're ready to fight for the compensation you deserve. If you've been injured or affected, we'll work tirelessly to address your medical bills, lost wages, and pain and suffering. Our experienced office will guide you every step of the way. Reach out to Van Law today for a free consultation. Call us now at 406-VAN-LAW. That is 406-826-6529. Or you can find us online at vanlawfirm.com. Van Law, When it feels like everything is lost, we'll help you find your way forward.